Okay, so what I wanted to talk about today is a little bit of a different approach to building blockchains. And you can consider this a conversation starter about something that we can also discuss at the breaks or afterwards. So the presentation, I'm going to try to make it as brief as possible, although there are quite a few slides, but most of them are actually not important. So from, this, so, okay. Okay. So from this standpoint, I came here in front of Apex Fusion and also in front of Tenderly, where I was an angel investor, and I'm currently VP of strategy. I've been a part of blockchain, scaling pretty much since late 2016. And I first started building something on Ethereum in late 2015. I was a part of quite a few different projects that were able to become very successful in this world, and some of them afterwards failed miserably, and some of them also failed miserably without even becoming successful, but that is another story. If you want to follow up with me, you can always send me an email, or visit Apex Fusion website and contact us. So when I actually got into computers and started working in computer industry, I was quite young, and when I first got interested, the debate about open source was actually starting, in the late 90s. And the big question back then was cathedral versus bazaar. If some of you know about this, basically Eric Raymond wrote an article called Cathedral versus Bazaar that covered the differences between open source development and building in public versus corporate structures and the waterfall-based development. I would say that Eric's article was very interesting at the time. It's still very interesting to read, but when we look at in what way, Cathedral and the Bazaar, or corporate development and open source development went, I would have to say that the Cathedral or corporations actually embraced open source. And on the other hand, I would also have to say that open source became less open source and actually more of a go-to-market strategy for any project. This is not a very nice thing maybe to say about open source, because having the source code open, still allows us many benefits. But if we look at the actual building blocks of open source, open source introduced agile development. Open source introduced the way that we use versioning systems and GitHub today, et cetera, et cetera. All of these are actually adopted by big corporations today, and there is no actual difference in open source development and corporate software development at all, except for the fact that you can, in most cases in open source, actually get to the GitHub and copy, paste, and fork the code. The reason why I say in most cases is because if you actually want to try and become a friendly fork of a project, you will notice that there are different types of modes that you might need to cross. So the Cathedral and the Bazaar, pretty much became the same, and the open source became a go-to-market strategy, which led also to the change of open source-based business models. If you look at the way, people started monetizing open source back in the day, it was pretty much professional services. The code base was open, you had some knowledge, you were able to charge for that knowledge, and that's where we went. Well, over time, people realized that professional services, actually has the lowest margin, it's harder to defend, it's less scalable, and other, ways of monetizing that actually required you in most cases, and if you wanted to grow professional services, that goes for that too, you actually had to incorporate and become a corporation in many ways. So we have more and more corporations that are actually standing behind open source projects, and that is actually the de facto standard. So when we look at those ways, I would say that pretty much all big corporations end up in some type of an open core or hosted solution model. And right after that happened, the Cathedral, or basically the corporations, also followed suit, and said, well, we are going to use this as GTM too, with different types of freemium models, even if the source code is closed. And all of that, I would say, changed quite a bit with Bitcoin and Ethereum. The reason why is that those are actually the first projects that we can talk about that monetized open source without a need to actually incorporate. Suddenly you had tokens to bear the value and you were able to think about completely new business models. But we ended up with pretty much the same business model, you know, at the end of the day, when we talk about different blockchains at the beginning. You know, we started with monolithic. You know, it doesn't matter if it was public blockchains with no centralized authority. It doesn't matter if it's private or consortium-based chains or hybrid blockchains that tried to take both the best and the worst from both sides. But, you know, in this setup, we pretty much started again copying each other, and we started again talking about the differences between these models, you know. Are public blockchains better overall, you know, than private ones that enable you to scale faster, but, you know, have no actual economic incentives and are pretty much distributed systems like we had 50 years ago, which became basically the new cathedral versus bazaar. So because of that, when we are looking even at Ethereum ecosystem, Ethereum started dealing with this problem through Ethereum Enterprise Alliance, and it didn't go very far like that. You know, even today, when we look at the current thesis of scaling Ethereum through EVM layer 2s or ZK EVM layer 2s, or when we are talking about Polygon and other projects that you know, came based on this thesis and started then doing scaling in different ways through the ideas like the aggregation layer, or, you know, when we are talking about projects implementing account abstraction or having other ways of interoperability, we are still talking about an, in essence, monolithic blockchain such as Ethereum that is layering down to different use cases, but the main chain, or the L1, is basically still conducting all of the work. The other blockchains are pretty much just there to fragment liquidity and offer better execution environments. But at the same time, you know, Ethereum is basically competing with its own layer 2s on liquidity. It is competing with its own layer 2s as an execution environment. And in many cases, those layer 2s, on the other hand, are also trying to compete with Ethereum on token price, no matter if it's a governance token or a gas token or what they are using there. So what we wanted to do is to try actually a number of friendly fork projects, you know, based on the original idea, I would guess, of open source. And we said, you know, well, if we have public blockchains and private blockchains, maybe we can start thinking about federated multi-chains. You know, we can start thinking about spinning up layer 2 blockchains based either on Ethereum, Bitcoin, or other things that actually have their own layer 1. And they will not compete as liquidity or execution environments with each other. So this is kind of our take on that, but we are also, you know, doing a lot more there, or trying to write about it a lot more than we can do in a 20-minute presentation. So the project that we started to showcase this is called Apex Fusion. It's basically using a UTXO-based layer 1 of its own. We actually got our Swiss regulator ruling two weeks ago that the concept is regulatory compliant, which was very important for us because we believe that this is one of those things that we cannot do with the actual blockchains of today. It's compliant by design because it has its own layer 2s that are more localized and are acting as execution environments and running all of the data that could be considered private. It uses different technological approaches to build out blockchain networks with centralized planning of the entire ecosystem, but completely decentralized execution where you can have a public permissionless layer 1 blockchain. And we also try to then scale the execution environments through our layer 2s. If you want to become a part of this ecosystem, you can even today become a stake pool operator for the layer 1. You know, it's completely public and permissionless. Let us know afterwards, we can talk. If you actually want to build something, you can also execute it on our layer 2s that use the same tokens across the entire ecosystem. We don't believe that Apex Fusion is going to be the last, or the only blockchain to go down this approach at a certain point, but we do believe that it's an interesting way to prove this concept, and so far it is bringing us more and more into a situation where I believe that the actual use cases outside of just DeFi and finances, which we also support through the layer 1 because it basically has a native Lido function on top of it. I would say that this is a better approach for building real-world assets, blockchains, building actual execution environments, for more like big companies. It's not going against Ethereum. It's, I would say, targeting kind of a different audience, but at the same time, we are using the same technologies developed inside Ethereum and a number of other ecosystems in blockchain as such. So if you at any point want to discuss this with us, we would love to have you either as builders or stake pool operators. And the reason, because we have centralized planning, for multiple blockchains that are acting in a more federated manner, that also enabled us to build out a ZK-based reputation system. So the governance on the chains is actually ran by a reputation that is tied to your addresses that are ZK secured, so that no one knows what your addresses are, but we can prove that you contributed to certain projects on our blockchain, or that you contributed in different ways. And you can actually have your reputation public and, be involved in the governance segment through that, or as well, be involved with other types of functions. The reputation system itself can also be used across our blockchain or other blockchains, which is also going to become probably an interoperability point at some point. Considering that the presentation was supposed to, land within those 20 minutes, I have 30 more seconds until I'm finished. So I would love to invite you over breaks to actually discuss.